Yo, what's up guys? It's your boy Nitrostorm here. Welcome back to Revive the Witch. So this is part 2 of my gear guide and it's all about legendary equipment. So before we start, there are important things that you need to know regarding legendary equipment. So they can firstly be obtained in two different ways. One, through this, the legendary equipment box, and the second way is through farming drops in the dull equipment stage. Secondly, what you obtain from boxes are different from what you obtain from stage drops. So for example, this shield that you're seeing right now, you will never get this as a drop in the dull equipment stage, as what you get as drops there is different. Same like vice versa as well. The stuff that you get as drops in the equipment stage, you will not obtain from the legendary equipment box. And lastly, certain passives are only available from the legendary equipment box and vice versa. Certain passives are only available from the drops. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's just go through some quick detail in regards to the passives. So for weapons, the exclusive passive from the box is Orderly Fashion, at which it says here increases damage and healing effect of the skill by 3% for every point of order energy gained. Now, I'm still not sure if that is just over the course of the battle. So let's say over the course of the battle you've obtained like over 20 order energy, because you consume some but you still regen some over time. Maybe it works like that, and then at that point you'll have 3% times 20 stacks, which is a huge number, but we'll have to see if it's that or if it's order consumed when using a skill. Secondly, for the armor, the exclusive passive is Complexity, where it's a similar stacking ability, increases physical and magic defense by 3% for every point of chaos energy gained. So this one's order, this one's chaos. And an accessory I feel is one of the more broken passives as well. For accessories, the exclusive passive for a legendary equipment box is Periodic Supply, where the wielder, the character that's equipping the accessory, will heal itself for 10% of max health once every 10 seconds. So you can already imagine who you want to put this on and stuff like that, and just increasing their survivability by a huge margin. Now, before I go through all of the gear, I'll just quickly gloss over the exclusive passives that you can get as drops. I have a good example here, so I have one for each type as drops, so we'll just go through them. So for the weapon, the exclusive passive that you can get from drops only from the dull equipment stage is called Frenzy, where it will increase the doll's attack by 0.2% for every 1% max health lost. Now, I'm not sure if it'll stay forever, the buff, or if it takes in your current health for the attack buff, so it might be an enmity type weapon. The armor, the exclusive passive for drops is called Unbending Will, where the doll takes 15% less damage when under the effects of debuffs. So pretty straightforward skill, no need to explain. And last but not least, for the accessory, the exclusive passive for drops from the dull equipment stage is Inheritance of Life. So when the health of the character that has it equipped drops to 0, it will heal all other dulls for 20% of this character's max HP. So for example, in the case that Ella does die, 20% of 53k HP will be healed to the rest of the team, which is pretty nice. Okay, so now that is out of the way, we will now go through every single legendary equipment currently in the game right now. So, first things first, this is what you can get. And as I've mentioned before, you cannot get these as drops on the legendary equipment stage for the dolls. Without further ado, we'll go through them for each class. So we'll start with Guardian. So the box exclusive Guardian weapons are Sirius Shield of Defending with the Orderly Fashion passive, the Shield of Fairies, which doesn't have anything, the Gobnus Hammer of Chaos, which has the Orderly Fashion, and Earth Shaker. So if you were to get the ones without passive, the one that you would upgrade is the Shield of Fairies, as it has more HP than the Earthshaker. Of course, the Earthshaker has more attack, but as a Guardian, your main focus is HP, so you would build this over this. Now, if you were aiming for ones with the passive, then you would have to build the serious Shield of Defending, as it has more HP than attack. But of course, if you get either one of these, because it depends on RNG, I would build either of these two regardless. Now let's move on to the drops. So as you can see, I've highlighted in red the ones that you can get from the box, and the ones that are not highlighted are the ones you can only get through the drops from the Doll Equipment stage. So as I've mentioned, you would go build the Fairy Shield if you get this, because it's still fine, it's got good stats. But if you get the other one, I would suggest skipping it and leaving it as fodder. Now for the drops, you would focus on building the Shield of Glory in terms of the ones without passives. And for the one with passive, I would build the Rainbow Dragon Shield. Now the reason why I don't go for Final Blow, even though they listed it as best, it's because the Rainbow Dragon Shield gives more life. Like, I'm not sure what the need of attack is for Guardians in general. So I would list these two both on the same tier, like good tier, not one best and one bad. Alright, next up, we are going through the Destroyer weapons. We have the Fencer, which has the Orderly Fashion passive, the Aldholma the Lightborn with no passive, Fredo the Purgatory Axe with the passive, and the Elf Axe with no passive. So if you happen to get one of these two without the passive, then if you really want to build one of them, I would build the Aldholma the Lightborn, the one with more HP and lower attack compared to the Axe. Reason being is that Destroyers are for the most part bruisers, and so they'll have like tanky stats but still do damage. So if you're building Ella, for example, you would go for this one. But I guess if you have more offensive Destroyers, then you would use the Elf Axe. So, it's up to you which one you want to build here. But I wouldn't really suggest building either of them. For the one with the passive, the same thing here. As long as you get a weapon or a gear or armor or accessory with the passive, I would suggest building them, as it's really difficult to obtain 100 red gems to even pull on this in the first place. So now we'll go over the weapons for the drops for Destroyers. So the ones that you can only get through drops is the Yuan Panax, the Tinano sword here, and the other two which has no passive. So if you were to build one with no passive, I would suggest building the Amber Gold Sword, as it gives more HP. And if you get any of these two, it's fine if you build either or, but of course you would want to prefer the one that gives more life, because I believe Destroyer wants to have bruiser type stats. Okay, next up we have the Assassins. So we have the leader, Blade of the Underworld with the passive, the Obsidian Dagger that has no passive, Eurytus the Godsend with the passive, and Astral Bow without the passive. So again, in terms of the ones without the passive, as an assassin you want the most attack possible, so you will go for the Astral Bow. So if you get this one, I wouldn't suggest raising it, and if you get this one, it's fine to raise. In terms of the one with the passive, again, either or, because again, RNG, just build what you can. But of course, the better one would be the one that gives more attack. Now let's go through what you can get through the drops for Assassin. So you have another bow here, Deviate from the World with the Rage passive, Soul Hunting Dagger without passive, Real Knight Black Blade with the passive, and then this one without passive. So again, if you're going to build one without the passive, go for the one that gives more attack. And then for the ones that gives the passive, of course, since it's a drop item, you could greed and wait until you drop the one that gives more attack. But it will work regardless, even if you got this blade rather than the bow, because it still has the passive and it will still work. But again, depending on how this rage passive actually works, it might be better off building a weapon that has more base attack than the one with the passive but have less attack. Okay, next up we are now going for the healer equipment, the healer weapons. So we have Ivaldi with the passive, Codex of Prophecy without the passive, War Song of Inanna with the passive, and Song of the Damned without the passive. So if you're trying to build your healer, in my opinion, you want to build the one with higher attack, as for the most part, the heals are based on their attack. So in this case, you want to build the Song of the Damned if you manage to get the ones without the passives. And of course, if you get this one, I wouldn't suggest building it. In terms of these two, again, same thing. If you got the passive, just use it. Now let's take a look at the drop items that you can get. So again, the same deal. The drop items, some of them will have the rage passive, and then the other two won't. And then again, go for the one that gives more base attack. So in this case, you'd want to go for Temptation. So the harp looking ones will give more attack, and the book looking ones will give more HP. You know, pretty straightforward in this case. And if you're getting the rage ones, I wouldn't say it matters, because for healers, your main goal is to keep everyone healthy. So if it is a current HP based passive, then you're not really going to activate this passive, as for the most part, for like normal content and stuff, your whole team's going to be at full HP. So overall, you'd probably want to go for the orderly ones, the box exclusive weapons for building. Otherwise, just go for one that gives a lot of attack. Alright, next up, we have Compellers. So we have Luru's Eye, the Primeval, which has the passive, the Solar Orb without passive, the Grail, which has the passive, and Dragon Blood Grill, which doesn't have the passive. So in this case, the Grails will have more attack, the Orbs will have more HP. So again, for Compellers, I believe you want to have higher attack. For Govig, you can go for the one that gives more HP, because she is able to solo certain endgame content, which is pretty nice. And then of course, same deal, if you got the passive, just use it, because the likelihood of getting the other one for the same class with the passive is going to be really, really low. And so let's take a look at what we can get as drops. So you have the 6 Wings Undead Cup, which has the passive, the Fate Choice Orb, which has the passive as well, and the Elf Cup and Kirasin both do not have the passive. So again, similar thing, go for the one that gives more attack. Same deal for the Rage buff. Go for the one that gives more attack. So again, in a similar sense, Compellers definitely heal for the most part, so it's not really necessary to go for the ones that have the passive in terms of drop items. But when going for the box items, definitely worth building the ones that has the orderly passive. Alright, next up we have one more class, which is the Mage. So we have Ashkelon with the passive, Forbidden Staff without the passive, the Sanction of Divinity Gaigirs, which has the passive, and the Calamity of Fallen Gods, which has no passive. So again, similar deal, mages, you want to have high attack, so go for this one if you manage to get it. And of course, same deal, even though this one has less attack than this one, the passive, I'd say it's definitely worth using. Alright, so now let's take a look at the ones you can get from drops. So you can get the Yeming Blessing without passive, the Suye Samsara with the Rage passive, and then the Staff of the High Throne with the Rage passive, and last but not least, Dragon Fang Power without the passive. So similar deal here again, you go for the legendary weapons that give more base attack to give more damage output, and obviously for the Rage passive, you can build either again, but of course, since it's a drop item, you can try and brute force the better one, so you would build the Sue Samsara, since it gives the most attack for the same passive. Alright, so now that we've gone through all of the weapons, hopefully that gave you guys a better understanding on what weapons to use and upgrade, or use as fodder for Ascension. So now let's move on to the armor. So we have the Helios the Supreme armor with the passive, the Dragon Emblazoned armor without the passive, the Proides Vestment of Polar Knight with the passive, and the Dragon's Blood Gown without the passive. So if you've noticed, the armor looking ones will give physical defense, the robe looking ones will give magic defense. So again, if in my opinion, if you get the ones without the passive, I wouldn't suggest building them. And if you do get the ones with the passive, it's a good thing to build them. Alright, so now let's take a look at the ones that we can get as drops. So the ones we can get as drops, we have the Unyielding Will debuff. The Unyielding Will passive, where if the puppet is debuffed, the damage taken is reduced by 15%. So you can get the Underworld Armor, which gives physical defense, or the Stardust Clothes that has the Unyielding Will passive, which will give magic defense. And then the other two doesn't give any passive. So in terms of armor, no passive means don't build. Simple as. Alright, lastly, we have the accessories. So we have the Andvari Ring of Genesis, which has the passive, Moonlight Ring, which doesn't give the passive, Brisingamen the Sacred, which gives the passive, and Dark Necklace, which does not give the passive. So again, obviously, if it doesn't have a passive for accessories, I wouldn't build it. And if you get either of these, of course, you would have to build it in my opinion, because the passive is really, really strong. Now let's take a look at the accessories you can get as drops. So you have the Ring of the Punon, which has the Life Inheritance passive, which we've talked about. This one will give attack and physical defense. And we have the Ring of Alice with the Life Inheritance passive, which gives life and physical defense. So as you can see, both of them have a offensive version and a defensive version, but the box accessories are limited to magical defense, whilst the drop accessories are limited to physical defense. So of course, if you want to build characters in a certain, defensive stat, then you would have to use a different accessory over the box ones. But, that's like for min-maxing, which I don't think we need to do right now. Okay, so we went through quite a lot there. We went through all of the legendary gear, and so I guess we'll do a quick summary. So, if you're going for weapons, highly recommended to build any of the weapons that do have the passive in the box, regardless if you got the one with the preferred stats or not. In terms of the drop weapons that you can get, I would suggest trying to go for the one that has the preferred stats that you want to go for. So in this example for Guardians, try and go for farming the Rainbow Dragon Shield, as it gives more life, rather than building the Final Blow, as it doesn't give us much HP in the end. Just like an example. For armors, this one is a little bit more straightforward. No passive, no build. And same for accessories, no passive, no build. And the passives on either box and drop, they're all good. So regardless of whichever one you build, like whichever one with passive that you get, I would highly recommend building them, as the passive is really good. Okay, so hopefully you guys will now have a better understanding of legendary equipment, how to obtain them, the differences between the box and the drops, and so on and so forth. If you still have any more questions regarding the legendary equipment, please put some comments down below to let me know if you have anything you need to know, and I'll do my best to respond to all of you. Again, that's it for my gear guide. This is part 2, the last part. Hopefully this was helpful to you. It's been your boy Nitrostorm. I'll see you guys in the next stream or video. Peace.